I'm Leah Courtney. I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 and a business owner at As We Walk Along the Road. As We Walk Along the Road wants to bring you literature-based homeschooling resources and to help encourage you along your homeschooling journey. Today, I'm going to be talking about literature-based homeschooling versus other homeschooling methods. And this video is part of my literature-based homeschooling series. So if you haven't heard some of the other videos in the series, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what I mean when I'm talking about literature-based homeschooling. When I talk about this as a method of homeschooling, I'm talking about using real living books as the core of your curriculum. That doesn't mean that you can't use other things along with those books, but it means that you're using real living books instead of a textbook or workbook-based curriculum. So I often get the question about literature-based homeschooling, isn't this going to be a lot more work for me? Especially if a mom is coming from using a very structured textbook workbook style curriculum or an online program that is very structured like that as well. And so some homeschool moms are concerned that literature-based homeschooling might really be a lot more work. So I'm going to give a little overview of some of the most common homeschooling methods, and I'm going to talk about how literature-based homeschooling compares to those, especially when it comes to the work on your part as a homeschooled mom. Now, I know a lot about different homeschooling methods because I didn't start out being a literature-based homeschooler. I started out as a much more structured homeschooler. I had textbooks and workbooks. I came from the background of being a teacher before I was a homeschooling mom, and I taught in an elementary school and I taught special education resource classes, and the school I taught at was a small private Christian school, and we used a very structured workbook, textbook-based curriculum. So when I began homeschooling, that is the kind of curriculum that I was used to, and so that's what I used in our homeschool. I also had the experience before my kids were school-aged to teach in a public high school and teach special education classes there. So again, that was a very textbook, workbook-based curriculum that I was using. So I've had that kind of viewpoint also because I like to be very eclectic in my homeschooling and use a little bit of what works for everybody. I've used so many different elements of different homeschooling methods. So I do have some experience in using many of these. So first, let's talk a little bit about that textbook workbook-based curriculum. Usually this doesn't involve tons of prep for homeschool mom. Often you're going to buy a kit that comes with everything you need for that grade level. And that kit usually has some type of teacher's guide that's going to talk you through what you're doing every day. Sometimes these programs have a video where a teacher is actually teaching each class and the students will watch it just like they're in regular classes. Sometimes it's more of a workbook that the kids are going to work through sequentially. Sort of falling into this category, but maybe a little bit different, are the self-paced booklets that you can use in different ACE curriculum, sometimes it's called, or life packs. I know from one curriculum company, they're called life packs. Those I would also put in that category of a more textbook, workbook-based curriculum, because in those booklets, your student is going to read a section and then complete a work section, check it based off of an answer key that's provided, and then move on to the next section. So all of that, I think, would fall into that structured textbook-based, workbook-based curriculum. And as I said, it's usually fairly easy on your part as a homeschooling mom. It doesn't require much prep because everything is already set up for you. And if you have a student who likes to have that work through, accomplish, get this section done, now we're moving on to this section, sometimes that kind of student responds well to that kind of curriculum. Another form of homeschooling that I have used and love to use, and I still use in conjunction with literature-based homeschooling, is unit studies. Now, a unit study can be built around a great book. It can also be built around a theme. And as my kids were growing up, I loved using unit studies based around holidays as we got near those holidays. So a unit study takes one main topic, and then all of your other learning, your history, your science, all of that comes from that topic and is centered around that topic. A unit study can require more work from you as a homeschooling mom. You're going to have to get all of the resources together. Usually that means that you're going to be looking in different places for books you need. You're going to be researching activities that would go along with that. But there are a lot of pre-made unit studies that can help you and can make this so much simpler. So we're going to be talking at the end of this video specifically about some of those ways that you can use unit studies in a much easier way with much less prep from you. Another form of homeschooling, which I haven't used as much of, but love the idea of and sort of wish that I had had the courage to try it at the very beginning when my kids were little, and that is unschooling. And unschooling doesn't mean that your kids aren't learning anything. What it really means is that you are not doing school in a traditional method. You don't have a time of day where everybody sits down at the table and you work on different academic activities. You're not using some of the same curriculum materials, but you still are facilitating learning for your kids. And the research I've done and blogs I've read from unschoolers, Instagram accounts that are shared from unschoolers, I think this can actually be one of the methods that requires a lot of prep on your part. Sometimes people look at unschooling and they're like, well, moms just do that because it makes things easy for them. They're not having to teach anything. They're just letting their kids go all day. But that's not really true if you really watch some people who are doing unschooling a right way. And that's because they're constantly facilitating learning for their kids. They're putting ideas, they're putting materials, and they're giving their kids this desire to learn something, sort of an invitation to learning, I've heard it called. And to do that effectively, you really do have to plan and prepare quite a bit, because you have to think about what kinds of things are going to facilitate that desire in your kids to learn more. Along with unschooling is delight-directed learning, and this can be called many things: child-led learning, delight-directed learning, interest-led learning. But basically what this means is that you are following the direction of the child. So if your child has an interest in dinosaurs when they are in elementary school, you're going to do a unit study on dinosaurs and you're going to base all of your learning around that topic. So delight-directed learning can also require a lot of prep on your part. And the other kind of labor-intensive part of delight-directed learning is if you have multiple children and you're trying to follow multiple different avenues, you can end up having to split yourself in many ways as you try to focus on each child's interests. Now, in our home, I have 4 kids, and we did use this a little bit, but I sort of modified the idea. If we had an idea that one child was particularly passionate about, I might pursue a unit study on that, but I'm still including all of my children. So I'm not going down 4 different interest-led avenues. I'm just kind of taking turns on what we focus on that each child has an interest in. So that can be a little bit more labor-intensive. The last homeschooling method that I want to talk about, and this is going to tie in with our literature-based homeschooling, is the Charlotte Mason homeschooling method. Charlotte Mason was an educator who had an idea of how children should learn and what were some of the best principles for helping children learn. You can actually read some of her original books at Ambleside online. And I have gone through and done that. Ambleside has an abridged version of her main educational books. And it's really interesting reading because she talks about learning and education. But if you're a parent, many of her philosophies also would apply to parenting. So in the Charlotte Mason method, children learn, and their learning is based around real living books. Charlotte Mason referred to twaddle as books that are written maybe down in a lower tone for kids. They're kind of dumbed down. And so kids are reading these low-level books. And Charlotte Mason said, no, don't do that. Kids should be reading real living books, even from the very beginning. She encouraged parents to provide those books, and she also encouraged parents to ease into more formal schooling. So a young child, she believed, should not have long periods of time where they're sitting in a learning environment. So if you had a younger elementary school child, then your child is not going to be required to sit for hours doing schoolwork. Instead, you might have a short 10-minute lesson, and then your child's going to be free to move and play and do other things. And then later you might come back and you might have another short 10-minute lesson on another topic. And then your child has freedom to go and run and do. So she believed in this very gradual method of requiring children to sit and to learn. She also brought up some techniques like narration, where you are either reading aloud to the student or the student is reading a book or a section of a book for himself, and then the child is telling back to you what you just read. And this is a much better gauge of comprehension than some of the really basic questions that some literature unit studies use. This is actually being able to retell the information in your own words, which requires a lot of comprehension. She did not encourage formal spelling instruction like spelling word lists. Instead, she encouraged dictation, where you would dictate a sentence or a passage, the child writes it down, and then you take time to look at the passage, look at the words that are spelled correctly and the words that aren't spelled correctly. And the idea behind this is that as students are reading real writing, they're going to be learning spelling techniques, they're going to be learning grammar and mechanics, and what you read to them to dictate is going to be really good, well done writing that they can use as a model. So I was introduced to Charlotte Mason methods when my children were pretty young, elementary school. We had already decided that the textbook workbook style was not for us, and I was looking at different things. When my kids were first and second grade, I actually spent all summer and created a year-long unit study that we worked on for the next year that had all to do with the Middle Ages, knights and castles, and it was really fun. And I had the time to do that, and so I created this whole unit study for them. Then I started learning about Charlotte Mason, and I loved her philosophies. I love literature anyway. I've always been an avid reader. I've read aloud to my children since they were in utero. Honestly, I was one of those moms who would read aloud before the baby was born so that they would get used to the sound of hearing that and the sound of my voice. And I have maintained reading aloud up until my children were high schoolers. I would read aloud to them now, but we are seldom all home at the same time now that I have 2 teenagers and 2 adults. So reading aloud has always been one of my passions, and Charlotte Mason homeschooling just really fit with that. And so what I became most interested in doing was literature-based learning. And this literature-based learning really can take up some of your time You can spend a lot of time prepping if you're trying to do all of this yourself. Because if you're picking a really good book and then you want to build a unit study around that, you can spend a lot of time finding ideas that you're going to draw out. You can spend a lot of time coming up with activities that go along with the book. You can spend a lot of time trying to make sure that you're covering some of those main subject areas. But there is an alternative that can be really effective and make literature-based homeschooling much more simple for you. That alternative is to use already prepared literature-based unit studies. There are some curricula companies that sell a full year of literature-based unit study type curriculum. And you can purchase a whole year's worth of curriculum that is usually based around one main topic and that uses great living books throughout the year as the children do unit study style activities, all centered around that theme. So that is one option, and we have done that in my family. Another option is to use individual literature unit studies throughout the year. And I love this because this gives me an opportunity to cover a variety of topics and to be able to use a big variety of books. And this was especially useful to me in my elementary school years because when my kids were elementary school aged, it was kind of nice to change up the topic every now and then and to introduce new things and new topics because at that age they are open to learning about so many different things. So using these individual literature-based unit studies that are created for you, you can find a lot of these online that you can either download for free or that you can purchase. But sometimes it still is a lot of work for you to have to find these sites where you can buy these unit studies and try to coordinate a year's worth of unit studies. It can still be a little bit time consuming for homeschooling moms. And that is why I came up with my membership Down the Literature Road. Down the Literature Road is a membership for homeschooling moms that delivers a literature unit study to your inbox every month. These unit studies are aimed at kids from 2nd to 5th grade, although it's pretty easy to adapt some of them for your younger and older students. And I often give examples of alternative books and materials that you could use with older and younger kids. So this is something that you can truly involve the whole family in. My literature unit studies cover a variety of books and a variety of topics. When you join the membership, you'll see the book list for the whole year laid out so that you know what we're going to be learning. And then each month you'll get that unit study. And the unit study includes a weekly schedule, a daily schedule, vocabulary words, discussion ideas, and then activities in a variety of subject areas like language arts, science, history, hands-on activities, fine arts. So you will be able to take this literature unit study and just run with it without prep on your part. If there are activities that require materials, I provide a materials list at the beginning. So when you grab that unit study, you can look and see if there's anything you're going to need. But this makes using literature-based homeschooling really, really easy for you as a homeschooling mom. And it facilitates this opportunity for you to share great books with your kids. So if you are interested in that and you think that would be a great option for you to include more literature-based learning in your homeschool, then you will want to stay tuned next week because membership is opening enrollment next week. The enrollment will be open on Tuesday next week until the following Monday, so almost a week. Tuesday to the following Monday. And I will put that information in the video description of this video so that you can find that easily. So stay tuned to the video that's coming next week. I'll be sharing more about this membership, and I'll be sharing information about how you can enroll. So I hope to see you in the membership as we talk more about it next week. Make sure that you have followed and subscribed to my videos so that you'll be sure to get access as soon as I give more information about that. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk more about literature-based homeschooling next time.